And what I'd love to hear from you is you've been here the last couple of days and you've really been, you know, your ears, all ears, listening to everybody. And Emily, maybe let's just start with you. What have been, I suppose, the big takeaways? What, if anything, have you just gleaned from all of this conversation and just thought, yes, we're right, or not? It can be the other way too. But what have you noticed?
The big takeaway is that there is a desperate need for radical innovation here in the kingdom and across the globe. If we want to have better mining practices, we need to be radical about it. And incremental improvements to existing ancient technology is not going to bring us the world that we want to be in. And that is the main takeaway that I felt throughout the conference. I just had the honor of visiting the Cast Institute, and the innovation that I've witnessed and the inspiring people and their dedication and how much forward momentum is there just gives me so much excitement for the kingdom to actually deploy radical technologies and start things from the ground up. Industries that don't exist here are things that are within reach with this kind of mentality.
And we'll talk, obviously, a lot more probably about lithium, because that's what you like to talk about later, you know, and we'll just see what's happening on the battery circuit, just a little bit. Mark, any surprises for you? What's the key takeaway?
No big surprises. I guess 3 points in terms of takeaways. Building a super region requires countries, companies to negotiate, compromise, and agree on who's best positioned to do what. At the moment, the debate is still every country wants everything, every company wants everything, and at the end of the day, we need to connect those conversations very differently if we're going to achieve our objective to serve society. I think that was the first point. Secondly, sustainability and defining sustainability is very different to very different stakeholders, and so how we put some shape around those conversations might help the first conversation. And third point, increasing the awareness that mining is not actually about digging holes, it's about our industry supplying the materials that make the world work. It's about materials, that's who we are. We're not hole diggers. We actually provide the materials that make the world work. It's about time we got our story right in terms of the public, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and that's a different way to look at it too, and I think if more people were looking at it that way, we might have, you know, a different focus, but we'll talk more about that. Florence, you know, Development Partner Institute, you have a very specific focus, so I'm sure you were listening out for it. Were you satisfied with what you heard?
Absolutely. I think this week of conversations have been very enlightening. I think, like Mark said, there's no surprises that what we've been speaking about are still very important. For me, one of the biggest call-outs was for co-collaboration by industry for industry. I thought that was really important, very clear in most of the conversations that we've had. And from last year when I was here, I was very specific in Indigenous participation, local communities participation. So I was very glad to hear that was spoken about a lot this year.
A lot.
So, yes, I was very happy with that.
And a lot, again, too, in, you know, countries that I wasn't even expecting it so much. So I think even some of my panels, but it's people are, you know, actively engaged. And probably more so than they were before. And also I think that tremendous realization that this is part of business now and they have to be engaged. It's not just a one-off. Too. Chris, I know you were extremely busy for the last few days too, but I know you managed to catch a few sessions too. Again, coming back to, there's probably a long list of things you will be looking back on, but the key takeaways for you.
Thanks, yes. I mean, always lots to reflect on and things we can do better, but I think yet again has been brought home to me the power of us actually getting together, physically getting together. I mean, everyone on this panel, with one exception who's new to me, I know, and in fact, because of our meetings, actually do business with some of them. So I think first thing is us physically getting together is so much more effective than an email or a Zoom. And the second thing, and Mark's been a champion of this for years, and I've been inspired by some of the things he said, that mining is one of the oldest industries with the most terrible reputation, and yet the future of electrification and decarbonisation rests in the senior people who've been here's hands. The kingdom gives a completely unique opportunity to do it differently, to do it from ground up. So as opposed to being, you know, the terrible image that we have, we can do it in an environmentally friendly way, with new technology, with new training, with young people, with females, with the latest way of doing things, and create something that not only is so necessary for the EV future, but also can be done in such a more sustainable, ethical, and equitable way.
And I think also the fact that, you know, it started. And, you know, for this region, particularly with a lot of new projects coming on, they have a great opportunity to do it differently. And I think people are very excited about that too. Andrew, you know, as you listen to people talking over the last couple of days too, how encouraged, you know, were you from what you've been hearing?
Well, my key takeaway, I think, is the Saudi Arabian factor itself.
Okay.
Saudi Arabia is positioned as the partner of choice going forward, geopolitically unaligned, with low-cost power, abundant chemical reagents available, renewable energy ambitions, entrepreneurial spirit, open for business in every aspect, and to see that being pushed down from the very top with a clear vision and strategy, key KPIs outlined, guidelines provided to international investors like ourselves who are thinking about potentially building processing plants, partnering with Saudi Arabian private and governmental institutions to go and build the supply chains of these mineral resources internationally. For us, this is a very refreshing feeling because we've suffered in the mining industry for the last 10 years with the withdrawal of capital by banks, the typical financial institutions, equity capital providers have pulled out of the industry, and thank goodness strategic investors like the Saudi Arabian government and the various financial institutions that they've promoted have stepped in to fill that void. So I'm feeling very encouraged. We've had a huge number of meetings here, fantastic engagement, massive support from the Ministry of Industry and Mineral Resources. So we're going away with key next steps identified, and we're back in a month already.
Wow, and that's good. I think it's that concept of action too.
Yeah.
They talked about that from day one. The minister actually put it out there, and the fact that it's happening, again, you know, you doing something and coming back to do more. Peter, when we look at, you know, everything you look at is about the circular economy, and I think we heard a lot about that, which again was very, very encouraging. But what was your key takeaway and what impressed you most?
Coming from Latin America, a region that has a really mature mining industry, I see a historical opportunity for Saudi Arabia to create a thriving, sustainable, responsible mining industry out of scratch. I see all the ingredients to create a circular mining business model that creates economic growth, sustainable economic growth, I would say, generates thousands of high-quality jobs, and decarbonize the process in the way. So the opportunities that I see, it's something that happens a few times in history, and the other wave that I see that has a huge potential for Saudi Arabia and for the super region is the fourth industrial revolution. It's not possible to transition towards a circular economy without the technologies of Industry 4.0. So those two trends converge here in the super region, and I see nothing but opportunities.
Mark, if I might come to you, you know, Andrew just mentioned the finance side of it here. How important do you see the Saudi Arabian investments, not just here in the region, but also, you know, as they expand and to facilitate the growth of the super region? Sorry, no, Andrew, you brought it up. Chris, have I totally mixed you?
Yeah,
it's late in the day. Is that what it is?
You really, you make a really important point. I think that there are two factors which really will differentiate this region. And the first one is the financial duress which most of the rest of the world is experiencing, in my opinion, is going to carry on next year. The source and ability to fund, and mining is very capital intensive, is going to be extremely difficult. And is going to need a sovereign fund or Saudi Arabia to be able to see and have the vision to commit to that. Bear in mind that, you know, mine is a 20-year cycle, and I'll ally to that, as well as the source of capital that's so important. I think the stability of a region and the governance of a region is crucially important. I mean, if Mark's going to make an investment in a mine, it needs to be sure there's going to be 20 years. There's not going to be windfall taxes. There's not going to be a regime change. Now, I think that something is really interesting about 24, as well as we know all the geopolitical tensions, they've been talked about. But I think something that has not been talked about is that in 24, there will be 60 sovereign states that hold a national election. it'll be over 55% of the world's population. 4.5 billion people will vote. A vote can mean there's a change of regime. A change of regime can mean that there's a new tax or a new bit of legislation. How can you deal with that on a 20-year investment cycle? So I think in the region here, with source of capital, one of the most tenured leaders in the world, and a policy which yesterday announced 30-year tax exemption for any entity established in the kingdom, perhaps gives a lot more confidence and visibility to make that sort of commitment.
Mark, stay with this on the investment for just a minute too. I just came from a panel and it was a lovely description, I thought, and it talked about patient capital, available patient capital, that, this region at the moment, particularly as it invests in the super region and other places around the world, they don't need that return tomorrow, and they're being a bit more realistic. How important will that actually help to facilitate the growth and development of the new super region?
Well, I think it's critical in terms of long-term strategies. But I also think we've got to be a little bit careful in overweighting the conversation because capital can't afford to be too patient. Right. And so I talked about countries wanting everything today, when in reality, in many cases, they would be better off supporting exploration and mine development, where the bulk of value can be created, a return back to the country and the economy. That return can be directed towards, it could be agriculture, it could be a range of other things, because the infrastructure that comes with mine development can be multi-purpose and help develop the country in so many other dimensions. But if you go downstream, where the capital allocation requirements are much more significant, the risks are potentially higher, and you need low-cost energy and other issues in your favour, you may destroy value. I go back to the super region. You need to think and understand about 4 steps: exploration, mine development, and all the front-end infrastructure that comes, downstream processing, which has a different type of infrastructure, and countries go broke trying to get there too quickly.
Yes. So maybe they need to just spread out the economies of scale a little bit. Florence, again, we look at investment. It's not just in the actual mining. It has to be, in other areas. And when we look at stakeholder engagement, this also does take a little bit of investment, and probably, yes, financial investment, but it also takes a lot of human capital investment to really be looking at, what's needed. Again, as we look to expand this, as we look at perhaps a wider region, do you think this can and will stay, center stage for the time being? Well, forever. We need it to.
Absolutely. And I think we're really defining that relationship now. And as Mark was saying, with the 4 stages of development of any operation, that leg or that information that we need to be sharing along the value chain, that's very important. And I think having multi-stakeholder dialogue at the start of these investment conversations is very important when you want to end up in a circular economy as well. So I definitely think implementing it and understanding the value of investing into those dialogues at the very beginning with all stakeholders, be it communities, be it operators, be it government, that is very valuable and very sustainable as well for our future.
Emily, again, we look at, the super region. Everybody needs batteries. Everybody will need batteries. So many people talked about it in different sessions today, what's been done, what's been not done. So also, I suppose, that investment, yes, in the mining, but in support industries, and particularly something like batteries. Is that happening fast enough to be able to keep up?
Absolutely not.
Oh, okay.
It is happening completely backwards. We see the world investing in 40-year-old lithium-ion technology, and I'm very curious how many people in the audience would buy a 2-year-old computer, but yet we are using ancient technology in our phones. Why is that? Because no one will invest in it. Tough tech is quite a lot like mining. The average time in tough tech can be 20 years. So people are quite afraid of it. And in the United States, we have this, concept called the venture capital, but it really should be called vulture capital. And you don't see these technologies being deployed, and inventors and scientists don't have the freedom that they need. I know companies that have been slowed down because investors are trying to dictate things like how they build their cell. What are they doing? It's really, really, really an interesting concept that we have. So we need to be funding these radical innovations because, again, we have the opportunity to do new things and new technologies. And how much easier is it to build a house from scratch from the ground up than to rewire it and change out copper wiring? You know, it just doesn't work. We need these investments in new innovation. So the notion of patient capital is incredibly, incredibly important.
Peter, you know, you talk about the developed economy when it comes to mining in terms of Latin America. What can this region, I suppose, learn from that? And again, as they look towards the building and facilitation of the super region.
Great question, because creating this out of scratch will help you save so much time, money, and energy, learning from the mistakes and the right things we did. One thing I think is critical is to create a really strong, high-tech supplier ecosystem. I think it's critical in order to help the mining industry be efficient, be circular, sustainable, responsible, and as you were saying, incorporating the community, and at the same time decarbonizing the entire process. It's critical to bring companies, high-quality companies that are willing to create high-quality jobs in the territories in order to help the mining industry reduce their costs and being competitive. So that's a key role of the circular economy and the technology.
Andrew, when we look at, you know, Saudi Arabia not having a long, long legacy in mining, yes, the resources have been there without a doubt, but is that to their advantage, do you think, or what would you say?
Well, let's not forget that Saudi Arabia has a long legacy of large project development. The petrochemicals industry itself is a huge, huge industry in the context of the world, what Saudi Arabia has built. And I think that long legacy of engineering capability, support for patient capital, and construction of the full supply chain, I think is going to stand Saudi Arabia in good stead. And an understanding of the natural resources industry as a whole positions them advantageously versus others. So I think that Saudi Arabia is well positioned to capitalize on this. They have a fantastic geographic position to source materials from Africa, beneficiate them, and then supply them to the West and the East. And using their low-cost resource base, cost base, and abundant engineering capabilities, I think will be brilliant for them. But once again, just tapping on the engineering solution side of things, one has to admire what China has done in terms of building engineering talent. I think it's 1.4 million engineers a year leaving university in China. And you know, in the UK and Australia, we've seen a massive drop in engineering skill sets leaving university. The kingdom's investing in engineering capability. It's something that we've had a dialogue about, and we have to see that continue.
Emily, you know, talking about building from scratch, how easy is it to build battery capacity in a country like this?
Well, again, when you're doing it differently and it's a new technology in a place like the Kingdom here, where you have lithium and oil field brines and you have vanadium, you have two main components for a lithium battery. So it's actually easier in many cases to build something from scratch. We just need to not be so risk adverse with our investments, because if we don't take a few risks and if we don't commercialize things that aren't just available already, we will never get the change that we need.
But I think it is. I think it's on their list, the battery development here. I think I have seen that.
It is, and it's exciting.
You know.
It's exciting. This is also a very arid climate, and the news, you know, when you build batteries, you have to take all the humidity out of the air. You can only have a few people in the room at the same time because the breath itself has to be removed from the air, the condensation. So there are tremendous cost savings that actually can be had in this region. You have an abundance of solar. You have a young workforce that is excited and ready and wants change. So when we walked out of CAST, my head of corporate development looked at me and said, "This is our fastest way to pilot and deploy, isn't it?" And I said, "I think so."
And again, just quickly come into the talent side of it. Are there enough people here? There aren't.
aren't, well, yet that understand
Not
the
yet.
industry, but they will be because they can be trained. And, there's a man like Professor Donald Sadoway out there who's taught many, many, many people, and a lot of people at this conference over the years, the science and the tools that they need. We teach new people to make batteries all the time. We have processes to teach people to make batteries, to invent things, and it really wouldn't be difficult to create this workforce here at all.
Florence, stay with the talent and the people, and I think, yes, as stakeholders, we always have to look back on the people, and throughout many of the panel discussions, that came up without a doubt here. When it comes to talent development, when you look at the future of the mining industry, are you, very positive about it? Are you excited about it, that we can actually maybe turn around a reputation and bring more people into it?
I think yes. So definitely with the reputation around bringing more women into mining as well. We just came off a DE&I panel where we were championing a lot of the women who are in the room, and there are all of these women who are from different regions as well. We really celebrated our diversity, but also our strength. And I think in with that as well, talking to each other, I think some of the key takeaways from that is that if we continue to gather in person, to be motivated, to understand what our learnings are as well globally, and continue to create these pathways for more women, that will definitely start to activate local opportunities and local role models as well. I think that's definitely a key. And also skill transfers from similar regions or bordering regions as well. I think that's definitely an opportunity into the future, and also skills transfers from other countries. I know if the Australia-Saudi Business Council are in the room, they're definitely an active participant in bringing more so businesses across the regions, and then that in itself as well can help to bring more people across as well.
Now, Mark, we almost didn't quite lose you to the industry at one point. You were having some strange little temporary dreams of retiring, I believe, at one point. But
Yes.
you were brought back as the chairman of Vale Base Metals. And as I do my research on all of these panels, somebody said to me, well, it's like the Blues Brother reunion. Talk to me a little bit about having the right people in the right place to actually drive this forward. Yes, to have the talent in the wider aspect, but again, for every new company to make sure that everyone knows what they're doing.
The Blues Brothers refers to a small team of people that we've put together to support the asset review at Vale Base Metals, but it does, I'd have to admit, look a
Are you
little
back in action?
more like Space Cowboys, probably. It really, people are the key. We've all got assets that we work with, but if you don't have the right people developing those assets, it doesn't work. And if I can maybe sort of compare or connect the capital allocation conversation with the people conversation, you're a company like ours that is looking at how it allocates its capital and how it looks at improvement. Short-term operating sites, we expect the operators to deliver 3 to 5% structural improvement year on year. We have another group, high-level technical people, we're looking for 5 to 20% improvements over the 2 to 3 year time frame. And then we're looking at long-term thinkers, the technology team that Emily talks about, where we invest in patient capital. So putting that portfolio of opportunities together and recruiting the right people to work in each of those areas is the key to building an organisation that can deliver today, tomorrow, and the long term. And I think that's a really important set of connections to make to create a successful organisation.
Mark, let me bring you back to the focus on sustainability. Or no, that's Mark. Chris. Mark, thank you. Chris. Again, we look at sustainability, and I think that was built into every conversation everybody had, without a doubt, here today. How ambitious and how encouraged are you to actually think that we might get to a point where there's, what would you say, farm to table in mineral extraction in this country? Is it possible?
I think it's possible, and it actually has to happen. It has to happen. We have not got a choice. We can't keep doing what we've been doing. And I think that what we're starting to see is, I don't know, if you use a US analogy, you will go to a steakhouse and you will want to buy an Aberdeen Angus grass-fed steak, and you will pay a premium for that because it's better and you trust it. We're going to see that and starting to see that in the mining space as well. Where did it come from? How much energy was it used? How was it sourced? What's its whole supply chain? You know, we will need to, and we will demand that. And we're starting to see that not only from people who are taking the product, but banks who are financing it are starting to ask those questions. And I think if we can get that initiative going through every part of the supply chain, I think it will actually has to happen. And look, we've been here for 3 years now, and that was where the message started. And that message has probably got stronger every year and more determined every year, because there is an opportunity to do it. So
yes, that accountability, I think, yeah. Peter, would you agree with that need for, you know, accountability right across the supply chain, and you think that's happening more and more in the mining sector?
Absolutely, and I think it's vital in order to survive, that sustainability becomes part of the business. It cannot be a cost. And that's the beauty of the circular economy. It's that allows you to create a business model out of this, saving money for the mining companies, creating jobs, reducing energy consumption, bringing more material efficiency. That's the only way from my perspective, that sustainability will survive in this new era of the mining industry. I totally agree with Chris that it's like wine, right? You will pay a premium from where the resources will come from, but it cannot be an extra cost.
Yes.
It needs to be part of the business.
The value has to be there. Just we need to begin to wrap up this. So, Peter, let me just start with you. If there was a call to action you can give before our people leave, stay with us, please. We're almost there. You know, what would it be for this industry? Very quickly.
Learn about circular economy. It's the future. Yeah. It's here to stay.
Yeah. Andrew, again, maybe the quick call to action that says, you know, we've got so far, what do we really need to watch in case we lose, or what can we manage better?
We've got to cut the bureaucracy. We've got to be more efficient. We've got to be faster. There's obviously a need to enable this transition, but in order to do that, we need to actually provide the decision-making tools. We need to be efficient in the way we assess things. We obviously have to assess things properly, but we have to be faster. And once again, that's what's encouraging about being here in Saudi Arabia. Rapid decision-making, keen to progress the permitting process, and that's something that's comforting for us, but it needs to be international.
Emily, I mean, that pace, that needs, we look at the supply, we look at the demand that is clearly there, the speed to market. What can we do faster, better, quicker here?
We need to deploy quickly technology that we know works. We need to not be afraid. We need to instantly deploy, and we need to be smart. And there are ways, for example, with lithium, you can pull it out of a solution in a brine, and that doesn't take 20 years because you're not actually building a mine, and you can ride on the back of existing oil field infrastructure. So let's be smart about how we get materials. And sure, there's a lot more lithium maybe concentrated in a rock, but this is the faster way to deploy. So we just need to really think differently and radically innovate.
Florence, what would you say to the industry right now that they really need to be focusing on?
I would say definitely continue to work with each other as a true whole of value chain approach. Really listen to the co-collaboration call out that was made very clear here at this conference, but I think you can truly unlock a lot of value from continuing to work with each other, both locally and globally.
Mark, you're going to be kept very busy for the next couple of years too, and as we hear more from Vale Base Metals, but your great words of wisdom going forward.
As an industry, I think we have to start talking about what we do. We are the material supply industry. We don't just dig holes. And for us to deliver on our social contract, our social responsibilities, competitive collaboration are the two words I think are really important. We have to be competitive. We have to get better. But we have to navigate this journey together to serve society, because if we don't, climate change and a whole range of other things aren't going to work. So we have an important role. We have to help society understand what we do, and we have to work together to get there.
Chris, I'm going to leave you the closing word here. I think we've seen for the last 2 days, you know, this has been a tremendous conference. We've seen some great exhibitors here. I mean, there's so many people that have come here, the energy that has been here. You know, if I might just ask you sort of closing, has this been what you expected? And you were talking with all of the teams and the ministry and your team, I think the great work that everybody put in to bring this together. if there was anything, what do you want to see more of, and what do you think we need to be doing in the near term?
Well, I think there's been a tremendous amount of energy in the buildings. There's been a real buzz. There's been business being done. And the direction that we talked about before we went into this event was we wanted to turn words into action.
And the ministerial, don't forget that. I think you had, what, 70 countries almost here?
We had 79 countries represented, which was nearly twice last year.
Incredible.
Signing accords, talking about these issues, getting the message there. And I think that's how, and of course our intentions are that we will do more and move forward next year. And that's how we will succeed, by marketing ourselves better, by getting the story there, by getting accords there, by getting energy there, and actually delivering on what we all have been talking about.
Do you have a closing word there for me? Is that, look, you're good? You're happy, Mark?
Oh, I think that was a great way.
He's done. He's great. No. That's it. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing all, your thoughts with us. We have to drop it there. So thank you so much, Peter, Andrew, Chris. Thank you so much, Florence, Mark, and Emily. So lovely. And it's been great to have you here for this closing session. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. We're not going anywhere. So